Thanks for coming out tonight. I want to introduce you to a mate of mine, Jon. What I love most about Jon is you come across a whole range of people in the innovation space. And Jon's a little bit like me. He's a born-again innovator. So he started life in corporate, worked in large-scale organizations like IBM, which we'll talk about. And then he discovered this desire, this need, this real drive to do something a little bit different. So Jon, I was wondering if you could just get started a little bit about your background and how you came into this space.
Sure, yeah. Thanks, Tung Nguyen. Good to see you again.
In person.
Thank you,
yeah. Cheers, mate.
That's right. Look, my background, how far back do you want to go? I guess my first job that I got out of uni, I've always loved technology and cutting edge innovation and the really hard stuff. So that's why I did aerospace engineering at uni. It's something that's really right out there on the edge. And my first job after that was actually in a company that did simulation systems and language translation systems and artificial intelligence, believe it or not.
So hardcore.
Way back in 1998. So everyone sort of thinks AI is a new thing, but it's not. And a funny story about that one is we wrote this system which was a command and control simulator, and it used AI agents. And one of the AI agents was I'm not sure what you call it, a troop of kangaroos. Because
you're not kidding.
No, not kidding at all. Because when army units move around the countryside, they disturb wildlife, right? So if you move around and you disturb a troop of kangaroos, then you'll give away your position to the enemy. But anyway, we sort of made a joke and we armed the troop of kangaroos with missile launchers, so the guys would do this simulator, or the army guys would do this simulator and fly helicopters to buzz the kangaroos and then get shot down by missiles. Yeah, so we're doing things like that, or did things like that when I was starting my career, and I was in those sorts of industries in defence and DSTO and Defence Signals Directorate, which is our eavesdropping or spy agency, or technology spy agency. Then moved over to London, and that's probably where I really got the bug for startups and innovation. I joined a company over there that was a scale-up. It had been started by an Aussie fellow who was a real go-getter. He'd managed to raise a whole bunch of capital, create this software that monitored telco networks and did application monitoring and so on. And I worked in that company on some of the software there, and we would sell to the likes of British Telecom and Deutsche Telekom and UBS Bank and Citibank. And so they were doing. They only had 800 staff, and were really good at sales and really good at technology as well. It was just a great company to work for, and it really got me thinking about what you can do if you've got the drive to do it. Now, how I got into IBM bought that company. That's how companies like IBM grow. They buy growth. So they bought that company. I ended up working for IBM for 10 years, and that was great experience as well, because that taught me how to sell. It taught me how to speak to large enterprise. It taught me how to solve their business problems with technology. And IBM was a fantastic company to do that with. And then after that, again, I said, okay, I've had enough of the corporate life and the staid, rigid corporate life, and I invested in Moneysoft and got on the board of directors, and 2 years after joined Moneysoft full time. So that's how my journey with Moneysoft came about.
You mentioned a couple of really, really important things, like it taught you the ability to sell. It gave you the confidence to stand up in large groups of organisations and ask for money, ask for capital. How important is that a skill set for an innovator?
Massively.
Really?
Yes, absolutely huge, in my opinion. You're right. So you've got to be able to sell your concept and your idea so that you can raise capital. And really, if you're a startup, the ability to raise capital is everything. That is what will define whether you win or lose. Really. So you have to be able to sell your own concept, and you've also got to be able to sell your goods and your services and whatever it is you're producing to people who may want them. And if you can't sell, then hire someone who can. Right? Get someone who can. It might not be your skill set, but definitely get someone who can sell. It's massive.
So it sounds like a real core competency for an early stage business.
Definitely huge.
Okay,
Huge.
awesome.
Yes.
I might pause there. Are there any questions about this point, about capital raising, about selling in early stage startups?
It's uncomfortable to do, but you've got to do it.
No? All right.
You've got to learn how to do it. Yeah.
Thanks.
Thanks, Adrian.
Is this better? Can you hear us? So you've been sitting in the dark for the last 10 minutes just watching two people nod at each other? All right. So hopefully this is a little bit better. So the business that you're in now is a fintech. Australia has just grown phenomenally from the Dolomite account that you and I saw when we were kids. There's a whole bunch of very young blank faces looking at me. But are there any major innovations or trends that are happening in finance and banking that you're seeing right now?
Innovations, yes. I mean, obviously, open banking, which is a government mandated innovation that's occurring in a number of countries. Payment systems, of course, our national payments platform or new payments platform that's being developed in Australia. These are sort of government initiatives, but I think outside of government, the big one for me is blockchain.
Yep.
I think that's actually huge and is going to really mightily influence and change the face of personal finance over the coming years. I think it'll have a huge impact. I think in the way that, now I'm not a blockchain expert, I know there's a blockchain expert in the room, so I'm going to be very careful about what I say to not make a fool of myself. I know enough to be dangerous and that's about all. So, but I do think, when we talk about blockchain, it's not Bitcoin. Bitcoin is something that was created from blockchain technology. And blockchain technology can be used for, let's think about administration systems, share registries, asset allocations, transaction tracking, those sorts of things which underpin the entire finance system. We need all of those registries, admin systems, transaction tracking systems to be able to make the thing work. Blockchain allows us to do that, or has the potential to allow us to do that in very near real time, and also do it in a secure, infungible way, as they call it. So its safety in those transactions is not able to be defrauded, which makes the act of transacting and the act of investing and the act of doing something with my money feel a lot safer. So I think that's going to have a huge impact. Not only that, blockchain allows innovations like, I was talking to some people earlier, I would love to be able to do a spare change roundup into part of a racehorse. We can tokenize anything with blockchain. We can buy just about anything with blockchain. We can sell just about anything. So maybe you've got an asset that one person doesn't have enough money to buy. You can sell it to multiple people, potentially.
That's true.
So there's a lot of innovations that are going to come with blockchain, and many that we can't even imagine, I think.
It feels like the very early days of the internet. So, where blockchain is concerned, it feels like it's 1995 in terms of evolution.
Indeed,
Facebook hasn't started yet. Twitter hasn't started yet. All the things that we live and breathe today are still yet to come in blockchain. Do you feel the same?
I think so. I think that's true. Yeah, I think Bitcoin is, really the first, what would you call it, message board of the internet, right?
ICQ.
So, yeah, that's right. Yeah. So that's just the start of it. There's a lot more to come. Yeah.
Let's bring this a little bit closer to home. So we've talked about innovations in finance. Tell me a little bit more about Moneysoft, your organisation, and how you're disrupting personal finance.
Yeah, so Moneysoft is what I call a ease of use and accelerator in personal finance. So what we do is we make your life easier. That's what we aim to do. So we make it very easy for you to see what your income and expenses are. We make it ultra easy to just, at the click of a button, create a budget and track a budget, or set up a financial goal and track that, or to have a look at your cash flow in a personal sense. From an advisor sense, we make it very, very easy for financial advisors to gather that information that they use as input to the advice that they give to their clients, and use that digital portal as a way of interacting and communicating with their clients. So I don't know that we're a disruptor, and I think that term maybe gets overused sometimes. Like, disruption is really where you're going to completely change the way that an industry works. What we do is actually improve the processes that are there. So we're looking to improve the advice process and improve the experience of personal finance. It shouldn't be a difficult thing to sit down and do a household budget and check if you're not spending more than you earn, and so what am I doing with my surplus, and make use of that. That should be really easy. That should be automatic, and that's what we're trying to do.
That's a really good point. You talk to a whole bunch of innovators and people in startups, and like, we're going to disrupt X, Y, Z, this industry, this sector, we're going to completely take, and the word that you use is actually quite a humbling word, but improve. And you think about some of the things that are really successful today, like Amazon. They didn't reinvent anything, they just improved the way that we do
Correct.
online shopping.
Yeah.
But they improved it really, really well. So maybe improving's enough, and you don't have to be
I think
disruptive.
so. I think so. And even Amazon, I mean, they didn't take out the entire book publishing industry or book selling industry. They just do it a different way.
Yeah.
It's still there. That industry is still there. So yes, I think we've got to be careful with the term disruptor. And really don't try to be one. You don't have to be a disruptor to be an innovator. You can be an improver, and that's what actually most startups are.
That's a
in
good
my
one.
view.
Yeah, I got a good takeaway from that one. What are the, if you had, we've all seen the movie Back to the Future, if you had like a flux capacitor and a dock, and I think it's like 2.1 gigahertz, and you could go back to a younger John. As an innovator, what are some of the things that you wish you had known sooner?
Wow. I certainly wish I had realised that the ability to raise capital is so important. I know that now, and the people that I help now, I do help some other startups, and I make sure that that's hammered home. I think also just understanding that you need to be realistic. Like, optimism is great. It's really good to be optimistic and positive and all of those things, but you can be over optimistic. It's very good to have a dose of realism and set realistic goals and expectations and outcomes from the business that you have. And the other thing that I wish I had known as a younger John is the size of your potential market is just such an important metric to any startup. And you can get sort of wrapped up in the fact that you're helping people or you're doing some cool technology, and it's all great, and that's really good. But when you go to raise capital, pretty much any investor is going to say, well, how big can you be? Am I interested in you? And it's a very important thing to watch out for as a startup or a new business or an innovator. How big can your business be? How big is your potential market? It's a very key point.
It sounds like if you can almost preempt those questions and kind of like prepare for those conversations, you're actually much better positioned.
Absolutely. And it's okay if your market is not, the whole world.
Yeah.
It's not every consumer on the planet. That's okay. But be aware of what your market is and be aware of what your real potential is, and be very clear-eyed about it. I think that's really important for most startups and innovators to be aware of.
That's a very good tip. Awesome. I might reach out to the audience again now. Are there any questions that you've got specifically about lessons learned, mistakes made, anything? So the question was, when you're thinking about the size of the market, what specific information do you think investors are looking for?
They're looking for you to understand it. They want to know that you know what you're talking about and that you get what you're going after. That's what they want to know. Everyone can find that data. Everyone can get their hands on it, but can you interpret it better than someone else and be very clear-eyed and very realistic about what's possible within that market and what you're really going after and how many people you're really going to get on your platform and how you're going to do it. That's what they're looking for, in my experience. I've been wrong many times. Sure.
Sounds like you've been asked that question a couple of times. Any other questions? So the question is, if you're in an industry and you're competing with another competitor, how do you build that sort of X factor that makes you stand out and differentiate yourself for that investor? Okay.
Yeah, so your X factor is not about hopes and dreams and words. It will almost invariably come down to results. So if you've got higher growth rate, more revenue uptake, better distribution, more users jumping on your app or platform than the other person, they're the best X factors you can possibly have. If you don't have those and you're actually very early stage in terms of where you are in your business, find one. Know your competitors and know what they've got, and be very, very insightful about what they do, and then you can find the X factor. This is what we do different compared to them, and this is why we think it's important or valuable. But the best X factor is just good revenue growth, good user uptake, those sorts of things. That's really what counts, and that's why you need to be able to sell, or have a good marketing team or someone who can sell, because investors will be most interested in that.
That's a really good question. And if you actually see some of the really early Steve Jobs videos of him pitching, like some of the products in the early days, that's what he was. He was just really good at pitching concepts.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, that's right. And he was, as far as I understand, he was, fairly OCD about knowing what the competitive landscape was and what he was talking about and what the, consumer wants and needs were. So he did a lot of research and was pretty much manic about it, and that's why he was so good at it. And he was a great salesman. I mean, he's sort of a 1 in a billion, that guy, right? So yeah, great to aspire to, but don't expect to be Steve Jobs.
Aspire to be an improver.
Yeah.
Now, a while back you did an event at the University of New South Wales, speaking to like the future generation of, of aspiring innovators. What were some of the insights that you passed on at that event?
That event I went to speak to the innovators. Funny enough, back to that same subject about sales and distribution and go-to-market and pricing products, how to negotiate, doing contracts, those sorts of things. Like, how do we actually generate revenue? And one of the interesting questions I got was, how do I price my product? What price do I set for my product? I said, well, what do you think it's worth? I don't know. Okay, well, when someone uses your product, how much time do they save? How much money do they save? Not sure. Well, you better find out, because that's going to help you price your product. How much does it cost you to build that product and put it in your customer's hands? That might be another way to price your product. So just fairly straightforward concepts like that, which I've been lucky enough to work with some really good product managers in my experience, and I've got an understanding of. Some people don't know that, so it's not a bad idea to get a consultant or get some help or ask someone about that. So that was one interesting one. How do I price my product? Another one was, how do I negotiate? And one of the points there was actually have a price list. That's a really good negotiating tool. Well, here's our standard prices. This is what it costs, and here's why we've priced our products this way. Well, I want a cheaper price than that. Well, really, that's what it costs to build, and I know that there's a lot of value in this process. So you've got a negotiating point right there by writing those things down, and the rest of it was really around sales and how to actually set up a go-to-market channel and partnering with other companies and so on. So there were a lot of questions around that, and I think ultimately around all of those questions about sales, sales channels, go-to-market, should I have field sales, should I distribute through partners and so on. Just don't bite off more than you can chew. Make it manageable.
That's a really good observation. When I was working at BCG, they had this really good framework to understand innovation. In the early phase, it's like, what's the customer need? What's the customer problem? In the second phase is, what's the product? What are the features and benefits? And the third phase is about go-to-market. And what you just talked upon was a really high emphasis on pricing, distribution, channels, negotiation. And quite often, these are the things that innovators kind of like forget or put by the wayside, and they focus really heavily on the first two phases. Have you noticed that?
Very true, very true, yes.
That's interesting.
Yeah, and it's really important that you do know how you're going to take something to market, because you'll get to that point and someone will say, where's your X factor?
Yeah.
No one wants to buy your stuff. Well, actually they probably do, but perhaps you don't have your go-to-market and your sales team in place, or you don't have the skills and experience to sell it yourself, which again is okay. But make sure you're set up to get it out there. Yeah.
Awesome. I might pause again, see if there's any questions about that. Go ahead. So the question is, once you've worked through the analysis to figure out a price range, how do you actually lock on a price that you actually put into market?
Suck it and see. It changes. It changes all the time. And before I set up our price lists for Moneysoft, we had a good idea of what the value of the product was, how much time it saved, how much value it brought to the businesses and the end users that were using the product. So we set a price based on that. We knew what it cost us to build, and I think our gross margin was something like 90% straight off the bat. But it gave us somewhere to move, right? So it gave me the ability to discount for bigger deals and negotiate around that. Okay, well, it's $20 a user. If you buy it user by user, but you buy 5,000, then I can move. And you actually, over time, and when you're negotiating with people, you'll actually learn where the price points are. And where your starting point is in that negotiation process. Yeah. But put it out there and be willing to fight the corner of your prices, and then you'll go from there. But it's a living thing, changes. Yeah.
Just an add-on to that question, is the thinking different when you're thinking about a B2C product versus a B2B product?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I don't think it is different. Look, B2C is probably about reducing hurdles more than B2B is. Businesses are generally willing to pay for service and capability and features. Consumers are now very conditioned to the mindset of, I should be able to get something for free and get utility from it, and to hell with the fact that the company that's giving me that is going to sell all my data, right? So your revenue model is probably different in a B2C context. The revenue model is different, but you still need to understand where that revenue is coming from and the price of generating that revenue. So in that sense, it's the same. Yeah.
Any more questions before we move on? Okay, so the question was, in the early phase when you're raising seed capital, are there benefits or trade-offs that you consider between strategic capital versus passive capital?
There definitely are. And I think the biggest trade-off in taking on strategic capital is, especially early on, is can that strategic partner align with you for the foreseeable future and beyond. You might find that your paths diverge and you start having a bit of a marriage breakup if you're not careful about that. So I would probably tend to go for passive capital early on, because it gives you a bit more flexibility to do what you need to do. But strategic capital can also be really good if that strategic partner is well aligned with you. And that can actually give you a bump up over going the passive capital route. But ultimately you've got to make a decision to run with it, right? So, yeah.
That was a really good question, by the way. A really good question.
It is a tough one, and there's no right answer to it. The right answer is make your decision and go with it. So you've probably all heard of fail fast, right? And that's not, I don't particularly like that term because it's kind of got a negative connotation. I'm going to make a decision and fail quickly and then move on to the next one. But I think for me it boils down to make a decision quickly and back yourself. Go with it, but be ready to change it or to realise that it may not have been the right one, right? Yeah.
Okay. Now the industry in personal finance is changing at a rate of knots. What's next on the horizon for your business or your segment?
For where Moneysoft is, which is primarily around financial advice, I think for us it's really stayed the course. There's still 2 million Australians that want financial advice and can't get it in a cost-effective way. So we've still got a huge amount of work to do and a huge opportunity sitting there in front of us. So we've, as you mentioned before, we've gone the B2B route and we've distributed Moneysoft to people who are already getting financial advice to a fairly large extent. But there's that cohort of people out there who want financial advice, but it costs too much to go to see a financial advisor. So that's really next for us, and I think we will still go the B2B route, but it won't be family office financial advisors. It will probably be superannuation funds or other organisations like that that have a mass distribution reach.
Why is financial advice so expensive?
Regulation, compliance, the fact that it's delivered in a very conservative and traditional way, face-to-face meetings. You need an office space to do that in. That costs a lot of money to do all of those things. But I think a large chunk of it is around regulation and compliance. There have been, I could go on about this for quite a while. I hope that's okay.
Yeah, I'm genuinely curious why financial advice is so expensive.
So traditionally, the financial advice market was set up by product manufacturers, what they call product manufacturers. So banks primarily who manufacture insurance products and they manufacture investment products and wealth products, maybe annuities and that kind of thing for retirement. So the financial advice channel was really created by them, and it was a sales arm for those products. So people could, a long time ago, go out and say, I'm a financial advisor, and most of those people are very, very good people, loved their jobs, did great things. There were some people who saw an opportunity in that to take advantage of the fact that I'm selling product and making commission of it. And we've seen that in the Banking Royal Commission.
Here we have.
Some of that's come out, that's caused a lot of disruption, that's sort of come to light. So financial advice has earned itself perhaps a little bit of a bad name by allowing that to grow within its ranks or allowing that to occur within its ranks. But most of the financial advisors that I meet and work with absolutely love their jobs. They get a massive amount of satisfaction from it. They love helping people actually achieve things in their lives that matter to them. I mean, all of us go out and work, we take risks, we try to get ahead, we try and build some wealth, and financial advisors are truly helping people do that and take them and make the most of the money that they can generate with their best asset, which is themselves. Like our ability to go and work and earn an income is the best asset that most of us have got.
That's true.
And financial advisors help people utilise that asset to the full extent. They get a lot of satisfaction from it. So why is financial advice costly? It's now been over-regulated, in my view, because of that historical setup that I spoke about. So the regulators have come down too far on the other side and made it harder for advisors to do what they like to do. And that happens when you get, we want to weed out some bad apples and be seen to be doing something. So we go too far the other way. That's changing. There are some noises in the industry saying, okay, that's gone too far. We want to be able to get to the 2 million Aussies who want financial advice, but we can't do it cost effectively with all this regulation. And then there's the digitisation of financial advice, which is where Moneysoft plays, which then allows you to actually scale financial advice, and cloud-based software as well is also going to enable that, which allows little companies like Moneysoft to integrate with larger players like the financial planning system providers like IRESS and Midwinter and so on, allowing us to actually automate the entire financial advice process. And that automation cuts a lot of cost out as well.
Is there a role in the future for AI and machine learning to kind of like replace some of the advice that you're getting from a human?
Yes, there's some scope for that to happen, but I question whether humans will entrust their entire life savings to an artificial intelligence entity.
Yep.
I think that it's a human condition to want to talk to someone about it and understand what's actually happening. What is it? And it may be AI that actually executes the actions and does things, but I still think people will want to know why and what's the purpose, and how does this stuff work. Okay. And I think humans will be needed for that purpose in financial advice for the foreseeable future.
I'm going to test that hypothesis right now. So, audience participation. Stick up your hand if you've been to see a financial planner. Anyone? 1, 2, 3. You don't count, mate. Three people. How many people would go to a financial planner if cost wasn't a hurdle? Like, you wouldn't mind seeing a financial planner. Okay, about half the room. How many people would actually entrust their finances to an AI entity? More than I thought. So the number of hands that went up there was actually more than the number of people who have actually seen a financial planner.
Okay, so I'm going to test it as well.
Go ahead.
So when you say that you would entrust your finances to an AI entity, is that your entire net worth, or is it just part of it?
Definitely only part of it.
Okay.
I want to see a better than 51% hit rate on the AI's investment returns as well.
Okay, so that doesn't surprise me, and that's really what I'm talking about. I think there are areas where AI will come into play, and there'll be bits of our finances that we're happy to entrust to AI. But if I'm, let's say, worth $5 million, I'm going to see a financial advisor because I want to talk to someone about that and make sure that I'm set up and that I understand what the plan is. I'm not giving $5 million to an AI entity. Personally, I'm not doing that, right? And I don't think most people would. So.
Okay, that was a really good exercise. Thank you. Question at the back. So the question was, how do you actually give the financial advice?
So Moneysoft doesn't actually give financial advice. We don't give it. We provide our technology to financial advisors who provide the advice. So we enable their process and improve their process through digitisation. However, that's not to say that we couldn't move down that path that you're talking about, and this is where the artificial intelligence agents come into play. So definitely AI is part of automating the advice process. So yes, there will be ways to say, okay, if I know this about you, sorry, what was your name?
Jonathan.
Jonathan, if I know this about you, Jonathan, in terms of your financial situation, I can at least give you some pointers as to what you should do next. But in terms of full financial advice, like invest in this product and set up this regular investment plan, and you should have this much in retirement, and then invest in these annuities and have this much in a retirement account with a super fund and some of this in property, that's another matter. So we don't do that. We provide our technology to help advisors do that more efficiently and cost effectively. So.
I'm pretty bullish though. I'm kind of hoping for the day where I can go, hey Siri, could you buy me $5,000 worth of this managed fund? And Siri goes, sure Tung, done,
Can I have $500 worth of a racehorse? Yeah, I'll use John's blockchain rounder technology to do it. Done. Yeah, great. I want to be able to do that. I really do. I want to be able to do that.
I think we all do. I think we're all closet geeks, and we're just doing this to find ways to make the craziness from our own minds become this reality. Well, that's what Steve Jobs did anyway.
Well, we did talk to a company 2 years ago who wants to help consumers invest in residential property without buying a whole house. Okay. So this is a great example of where blockchain. I see some nods in the audience. This is a great example of where blockchain or fractionalization or tokenization of a larger asset can come into play. Yep. So buy $10,000 worth of residential property or a house and take advantage of the gains in residential property, yep. But you don't have to fork out or get a massive mortgage to buy the whole house. Yep. So those sorts of things happening. It's going to happen, and we've been talking to people about this for quite some time. It's not out in the mainstream yet, but it's definitely coming.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Question? So the question is, with the rise of blockchain and tokenization, is there going to be significant disruption where you'll see emerging players? Who do you think those players will be?
Well, if I knew, I'd probably be one. So for a start, but I guess a good way to break that down and think about it is think about enabling technologies or enabling capabilities. So you rightly identify that there will need to be probably some form of property aggregator. So there will have to be someone who actually owns these assets and then fractionalizes them and sells them. All right, and that's unlikely to be Jon Shaw who owns a house in Sydney. I'm not going to tokenize my own house. It'll be a large company that owns a heap of real estate and then actually starts tokenizing and makes a business model out of tokenization or fractionalizing residential property. So it might disrupt or change the way real estate investment trusts work, for example. They might be the ones that start doing things differently or disappear even.
Have you been following the non-fungible token hype at the moment?
I have, yeah. I have. I actually sent myself a link that I found on LinkedIn about it just the other day.
Yeah,
so
what's your take on that?
I'm reading. I don't have a take at the moment, and I don't know enough about it to speak intelligently about it. So I'm going to skip that question. Well, I won't skip it. I won't skip it.
I'm happy to hear your unintelligent view on it.
Non-fungible token. Well, I mean, my understanding of that is that that's the main advantage of this type of technology, right? Is that you have tokens or blockchains. You have chains that cannot be corrupted. All right, so it's something that you own together. What I question is the means of storing non-fungible tokens. So it's great to have a token that's non-corruptible. You can't steal it, you can't corrupt it, you can't fool around with it, but maybe you can fool around with the storage system. Yep. That keeps it safe for you.
Or just lose the keys.
You don't have a physical wallet or a safe, or you lose the keys, right? You don't have a safe in your house that's cemented down and with steel bars holding it to the floor with your gold bars in it. Now you've got these tokens, but where do they live? Yeah. So I think there's sort of the big questions around holding those tokens as an asset. That's my unintelligent take on it.
It's a pretty good unintelligent take on it. Knowing what you know now, what would you do differently moving forward? So you've got the whole sales down pat, you've got the capital raising down pat, you've got like some decent experience both on the corporate side and on the startup side. What would you do differently now?
I would probably game theory a lot more than I have before. I would actually look at, take a lot more time to look at potential outcomes of particularly strategic investment or any other major actions that I took as a startup business, and I would try to formulate plans or contingencies for those outcomes. Okay. So I would definitely do that a lot more now than I had before.
Gotcha.
And it's very, very easy when you're starting out and you've got a startup and you're all optimistic and this thing's going to be great and you're very positive about it, which are all good things. It's very easy to get a little bit too wrapped up in that and not look at the what if things go bad scenarios.
What's an example? Can you give us a hypothetical to make that real?
Yeah, okay, so an anecdote. All right, let me think of that. All right, so let's say hypothetically, we negotiate some strategic investment and that has about 50 pages of contract and deeds and options attached to it with all sorts of different conditions. And we all get into a little bit of groupthink about, okay, this is all going to work out and be great, rather than actually doing the hard work to go through that 50 pages of really boring deed and options and agreement to work out what are the 100 different paths this could go down, and what do they all mean? So yes, that sort of thing has happened with Moneysoft. It's not, you know, as extreme as I've just given an example, but it's really important that when you do go into those things that you take the time to do that hard, crappy work and understand where it could go, and realise that every single one of those 100 possibilities is a real possibility. Anyone could happen.
I think when you're in that young innovation kind of like hopeful mode, you kind of forget that things can go wrong.
Yeah, and you can get lucky and they don't.
Yeah.
You absolutely can.
I think the vast majority of them
fun.
don't get lucky though.
Right, yeah.
You know, if you look at the
That's right,
success
yeah.
rates.
Yeah.
Okay.
Correct, yeah.
So it's almost like you have to keep a part of yourself to be realistic.
Definitely, yeah, definitely. And we hear in the news and in the media all the time about all the great success stories. You know, Afterpay, and they went stratospheric, and
Canva.
you know, Canva and
Great
Atlassian, and you know, for every one of those, there's thousands of others who have had a go and not made it. And I think a lot of that, you know, businesses, or you know, X number of businesses fail in their first year. A lot of that is down to not taking the time to put into risk management and planning.
Yep.
It's boring stuff, it's not the fun stuff, it's not the sexy stuff, but you've got to do it. It's really important to do it.
Where is that in terms of the priority of being able to sell, being able to raise cap, and then this risk management and planning? Where does that fit in?
It definitely comes later.
Okay.
I think it definitely comes later, but it's probably good to be mindful of it at all times, because you never know when it will come up.
So it's a third date problem. First date.
Potentially. It might come forward depending on the situation of the business.
Okay.
So it's always important to be mindful of that, I think.
Yeah.
And it could pop up at any moment if a strategic investor comes along before you've even made a sale. You do it then, before you're doing your heavy selling piece.
Awesome. And how have you found Sydney as a base, being an innovator in this city?
Great. Actually, I think Sydney's doing a really good job of it.
Yeah.
Actually, an excellent job. My only gripe or wish is that our capital markets could be a bit more friendly to startups. We all complain about it. I know you're probably sighing, but I think Australia's got a hell of a lot to offer, and a lot of fantastic innovators and a lot of people who are willing to take risk. And it takes a lot of courage to do that, to actually move out of the corporate world. And I didn't actually do it. I was talking to someone earlier. I'm like a second follower. I actually find people who have had that courage to do it, and then I've got enough courage to say, all right, well, I'll come along and help you join in. But I've never actually mortgaged my entire house to get a piece of technology built. That's not me, that's other people, and I've got so much respect for people who do that, and it's probably not something that I'll ever be ready to do, but I'll come along and help those people, and I will put some risk into it, but I'm not prepared to take that amount of risk. So we've got people who are willing to do that, and that is so rare
and brave
and so brave to do that. And I would just like to see the Sydney's capital markets be a little bit more willing to take on some risk and back that, like the Silicon Valleys of the world are willing to do. I think we could have that in Australia. We've got people who want to do it, but if we had an investment community that was maybe a little bit more risk-minded, we'd probably have a lot more homegrown startups and technology in particular.
That's a good point. So you're kind of like Ringo Starr, you're like the second drummer that came on.
Yeah, that's right, yeah, the yellow.
On that note, everyone, please thank Jon for joining us tonight, sharing across his ideas.
Thank you, everybody. Pleasure. Thank you, Tim.